so some exciting news that I've got for you today. I'm going to share with you the new GH5 II. I've got one here. I've been using this for about a week now. Super excited, but this is a big day because there were more announcements from Panasonic. Pretty big day for Micro Four Thirds. Let's get into this. Okay, so GH5 Mark II, we're gonna get to this in just a second because I wanna talk about some of the other things. First off, there is a development announcement for the GH6. So unlike some other camera companies, Panasonic have actually given us a few clues as to what we can expect with their development announcement. First thing we know is the GH6 is gonna look like this. Okay, I have no idea what it's gonna look like. There is no picture. I thought that might be kind of funny. But we do know that this will be a brand new flagship for the Micro Four Thirds system in Panasonic's lineup, and a couple other things. There will be an entirely redesigned brand new sensor, which is going to give us unlimited recording in DCI 4K 10-bit 422. The camera will also shoot 120p at 4K in both high frame rate and variable frame rate if you like to do the S and Q mode so you can do your overcranking in camera. This camera will let us push the resolution a little bit. You'll be able to do 5.7K video, 60p, 10-bit. It's gonna be pretty awesome. Comes in at a price point of $2,500. And my notes also say, quote unquote, and more representative specifications. So this is all we know for now. I'm hoping that some of those representative specifications will include the possibility of face detection, autofocus finally. I know that it has been a long time coming and that Panasonic really dedicated themselves to DFD, which is a contrast-based system, which is not on the level of what you're seeing with Canon, Sony, Nikon, so on and so forth. This would open this system up to a lot of creators. When you're doing these films like I'm doing right now, where you're not only on camera, you're also making the video, focus is a big deal, and having face detection autofocus, I'm not saying it's coming, I don't know anymore, I'm just saying I'm hopeful as a big fan of Panasonic, and we'll see. That's the GH6. They've also announced a new lens that I am super excited about. It's going to be the Leica DG 25 to 50 millimeter f1.7. So it's going to be a sibling to this lens, which I've been using, God, solid for like over a year now. This is the Leica DG 10 to 25 millimeter f1.7. So constant aperture of f1.7. This lens, which is out now, you can buy this one. It's incredible. This gives you a full frame equivalent of 20 to 50 millimeters. This will be a continuation. This will be a 50 to 100 millimeter. I really hope we see a third lens in this lineup. I got this a year ago, and I've got to show this to you. Like, literally, this is the first time it's come off of my GH5 when the GH5 II came. I don't know where the lens cap is. I use it all the time. This lens is really optimized for video. It looks great with stills, but you have declicked aperture throughout the whole range. You also have a clutch to turn on and off manual focus or autofocus, and it's huge, but it is amazing. I use this lens a lot for shooting B-roll, especially when I want an overcranked look. And for a long time, the GH5 was the go-to camera if you wanted 60p and 4K. What I love about this lens is when you get really close in on subjects, so if I'm doing B-roll of a camera or a phone or something like that for this channel, a lot of times lesser lenses will start to show a lot of chromatic aberration when you get super close focusing. This one has none. It is amazing, and I love being able to just dial in the exposure, even on the fly with a declickable aperture. This lens is outstanding, and I'm really excited that now we're going to have a equivalent of 50 to 100 millimeter version, but it'll be the 25 to 50 millimeter f1.7. It's going to be awesome. I promise we're going to get to the GH5 II in just a second, but I also want to mention the firmware updates that are coming out. These are all coming out on June 8th for the cameras as follows: the GH5S, the G9, and also the G100. And the big ones are for the G9, GH5S. Both those cameras will get improved autofocus performance. They're saying it's actually going to be a 2 times faster human recognition for AF, as well as 5 times faster improvements for animal recognition. Now, still, this is what it is. It's DFD. Speed improvements are excellent, but in terms of continuous shooting and staying in focus, I don't have super high hopes. But what is cool is for the GH5S, this firmware update will also give you raw video data output over HDMI. So you can now do Apple ProRes RAW. It can be recorded on the Atomos Ninja 5. It's going to be 4K and anamorphic. Anamorphic will be 3.7K. You're going to get 12-bit raw video up to 60p. Actually, technically, it's going to be 59.94 frames a second, but same thing. All three of these cameras are going to get some nice upgrades as well, including the red record frame indicator, as well as detection for vertical playback, as well as orientation. So if you're going to do weird things with your camera and you don't want it to swing into vertical orientation, you can select that. I guess there's a lot of emphasis on vertical video these days, certainly with social media, so these cameras are really set up to help creators make the best content possible. So let's talk a little about the GH5 Mark II. So I want to start this off by addressing the question that I'm sure a lot of people have, which is, if there is a G6 coming by the end of this year, why do we have a GH5 Mark II? So the GH5 has been an incredibly successful camera for Panasonic. In fact, there are professional video productions that use GH5s. They use them because they're a smaller, cheaper alternative to much larger cameras. You can use multiple cameras and you don't wreck the budget. And they give you incredible video quality. This has been a really watershed camera for Panasonic. Now, Panasonic have been awesome about giving us firmware updates over the years. There's been a lot of improvements made on this camera. Unfortunately, we've gotten to a point where you really can't do more without some updates to the hardware in this camera. So what's cool is with the GH5 Mark II, they are going to continue to support this. It won't be the flagship, that'll be the GH6. But you can now get this camera for $1699 body only. It was $2,000 when it came out. I ordered this GH5 when it came out, so this would have been March 2017 or so. And at the time, you had to have a license code to activate Vlog-L within the camera. So I paid another $100 for that. They would send this to you from B&H or whoever. It was a piece of paper in a box you had to pay shipping for. So I paid an initial $100 for that. It was back ordered and I had to wait 2 months before I could activate Vlog-L in camera. That is over with. Now with the GH5 Mark II, you get Vlog-L already activated and ready to go, and it's about $400 cheaper. Physically, the GH5 Mark II is pretty much identical to the Mark I. We do have the addition of the red record button and the red dial. They're brought over from the GH5S, and the Function 1 button now is defaulted and has an icon that's set up for your photo style, so you can go through and change that from Vlog-L to like 709 or whatever it is that you want to shoot on very quickly. The biggest difference on here is the USB-C connection. We now have USB-C 3.1 with power delivery, so you can actually power the camera via USB-C if you have a really long recording you want to do and you're worried about battery life. Another major difference that you're going to find on the GH5 Mark II is the menus have been overhauled and updated to the latest menu system that Panasonic is using, even in the full frame cameras. This is a huge upgrade because I like the way this menu system is organized a lot better. It's icon based. Even the quick menus it's just a better redesign, and it enables you to get to things much quicker, much more easily. Under the hood, there's some nice additions as well. We could do 4K at 60p on this camera before, but it was 8-bit. Now, generally speaking, I love the image that I get out of this camera. I found that if I expose it correctly, I usually don't have to push it too far with the grading that I do. But now we have 10-bit 60p 4K footage. So if you do need to grade it, you'll be able to push it a little further. Of course, this is 420, not 422. Would have been nice to have seen 422. We will get that in the GH6, but it's a big improvement from what we had before. We also have 2 new picture styles that we have seen on other cameras, but now we have them on the GH5, and these include L Classic Neo as well as L Monochrome S. These are ideal for people who don't like to do a lot of color grading but want a unique look to their footage. The rear LCD screen got a nice little upgrade as well. It is now a 3-inch 1840K high visibility touchscreen. It looks fantastic. We also have a new battery. This is the DMW BLK22. It's the same battery that we have in the Panasonic S5. It's going to give us 2200 milliamp hours compared to the previous 1860 milliamp hours. So it's a little bit more power. It's really nice, but what's cool is the camera is backward compatible, so it can take both batteries. So if you already own a bunch of the original GH5 batteries, they will work with this camera as well. We also have some new autofocus improvements that just couldn't be done on the processor in the GH5 as is. So now we have things like animal recognition and a lot of the deep learning stuff that Panasonic has put into their other cameras, where we now have been updated on this side. Now, I do want to say this, that don't expect the kind of performance that you're going to see from Sony or Canon or even Nikon on this camera. This is still contrast only autofocus detection, but having said that, I've always felt that Panasonics are fine for single focus shooting. It's the continuous that starts to become a problem, because it's just the wobbling and the seeking back and forth when it's trying to lock on a subject. These cameras have gotten better. They're definitely usable, but I would say that just it's not going to be up to the high hopes that we would have for something like this. I'm waffling around in a plea to have phase detection on the GH6. There's also an in-body image stabilization performance boost, which is kind of funny to report because I've always felt that this camera with the dual IS that they've got going. You've got 5-axis on the sensor that will work with anything with optical image stabilization in a lens. It's one of the best on any system available anywhere. This really has been the gold standard. And they've improved it 1.5 stops. So it used to be 5 stops of correction. Now we've got 6.5. And I'll talk about it in another video when we dive into this, but I think that like these systems are so good, the problem is no longer can you hold the camera steady, it's can you keep your subject still. But anyway, nice to see an improvement there. We've got some tools added to the GH5 II, such as frame recording indicators. This kind of acts like a tally lamp around the rear screen. We've got a luminance spot meter now, so if you want to see exactly what 18% gray is on your card, you can do so. We have the ability to show 2 zebra patterns in opposite diagonal directions, which is really nice. Finally, the waveform monitor. You can resize this now, which is super cool. If you use the Leica 709 profile, you now have the ability to adjust the knee, in other words, where the highlights roll off. In terms of image quality, this is the same sensor from the original GH5. However, it has been modified. We have an AR coating layer on the top. What this does is it eliminates reflections that might be coming off of the sensor. So, for instance, if you're shooting something and you have kind of a glare to it and you're going to have some lens flare involved, it will limit it only to flare from the lens. You're not going to get anything off the sensor, so that should improve contrast in some situations. This is the latest Venus engine that Panasonic are saying is inspired from the GH5, and so they're saying that this is going to give us better color reproduction, better clarity. It's just going to give us a better image quality. Now, in these testing that I've done over the last week, there is a difference. Now, whether it's better or not, I kind of tend to think that it does look better and it does look more faithful to what it is that I'm trying to reproduce. The original GH5 had incredible image quality, and this one just got a little bit better. You basically can match this up with Vericams. So if you're shooting in Vlog-L, for instance, you can use any of the LUTs that you can download from the Vericam website. You can do a lot of really creative things with this camera. And of course, this wouldn't be a Panasonic release without a promised future firmware update. So before the end of the year, firmware will come out that will enable a few things on this camera. First of all, if you use the live composite shooting mode, you'll be able to do that on the GH5 Mark II, which is pretty cool. And then the one that excites me the most is to be able to, essentially with these systems that are focused by wire, in other words, this is not a physical focus ring, it's actually electronically focusing, we will now have the ability to do 3 things. You can go in and select between linear or non-linear, or you can actually adjust the rotation angle of the focus. That is something that I have been waiting for a long time that's going to really make this next level in terms of use if you do a lot of focus pulls or manual focusing. And I don't want to forget the new live stream feature, and this is actually something that is really cool and really useful. Normally when cameras, in the age of pandemic where everybody's trying to turn this into a webcam somehow for this amazing zoom quality, most camera manufacturers, when they start talking about how to do that through USB, I start to glaze over. I'm not interested. Panasonic are offering something that is very unique with this camera. So you can do the zoom setup thing, and I think the best way to do that is use an HDMI connection, connect that to your computer through an HDMI card to do the conversion. You're going to get the best image quality doing that. But what Panasonic have added in here is the ability to live stream from the camera straight through your Wi-Fi to an RMTP or SRMTP server, depending on what you're using. So this would include things like YouTube Live or even Twitch. You can live stream through this camera without a computer at all. You can use your computer to look at comments and interact with people, but you don't have to have the streaming happen through your computer. You'll do this up to 4K 60p. Of course, the bottleneck here is going to be what your internet connection is, what you're able to upload, but this is an unbelievably cool feature. And it's super easy to set up. So you can just do it straight from the menus where you connect it to the Wi-Fi, and then you give it the RMTP server connection credentials, and then you're up and going. Or if you don't like typing with your thumbs on the back of the touchscreen, you can use their app, which will basically talk to the camera. You can do all your setup there. You can record multiple stuff in there and store it in memory. And this becomes very powerful in terms of using it as a live streaming tool. And of course, it goes without saying, but of course, the GH5 Mark II is fully compatible with Panasonic's XLR audio adapter. Attach this to the hot shoe and you've got XLR inputs for audio. This gives you a very capable video package. Another thing I want to add to this is that I mentioned I bought my GH5 when it first came out, and I am really excited to see Panasonic continue their dedication to this, even though we have a GH6, which will be the flagship. This camera has come down in price over the last couple of years, and it's going to stay at a very reasonable price point. $16.99 body only. There's a kit version for a little bit more. But this is a really great option for a lot of photographers. And I think one of the problems that we've had, and this is a case for Micro Four Thirds, and it would be worth doing a whole video talking about this actually. But one of the things about Micro Four Thirds, because of the size of the sensor, it's much smaller, we don't have a lot of the limitations and the problems that have come with full frame DSLRs in terms of recording limits, overheating issues. And that's why the GH5 to me has always been an incredible camera. And it's like, I call it the Swiss Army knife, because if I need to do a longer live stream or I need to do a Zoom call, right? Whatever it is that I'm doing and I need a good camera that can live up to the moment, it's always the GH5. The one thing that is the shortcoming with that is the lack of phase detection autofocus, and you get used to manual focusing. I've been manual focusing this whole video. You get used to it, even though it's a pain, but I think that that's the only one thing that's holding Panasonic back at this point. If they can get a better autofocus system in here for continuous autofocus, I think it's going to be game over, because I think these cameras, in terms of video quality, and I think to a large degree still quality, they're outstanding and they compete with everything else. And definitely the video quality, there isn't anything else that kind of touches this. It really is that good. I would love to hear what you guys think, so drop me a comment below. I'll do a more in-depth review of the GH5 Mark II when I've had a little more time and a little more experience shooting with it. There's a lot that's going on here, but I've really enjoyed it so far. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Until then, later.